This is actually for that book. It's okay. I'm still on subject. This is the Book of Jacob, and skin is what we're talking about. I've never stood up for one of these things in front of just a mic, so if I pass out, it's carpeted, so don't worry about me. Don't rush up or anything. The chime rang, and Cleo looked up from her work, her black rubber hands pausing in mid-air like smooth tarantulas hanging from invisible silk threads, waiting, waiting. "Are you the Duchess?" he asked, the man whose skin was the color and texture of worn saddle leather or an aged oak wine barrel. He stood in the doorway of the little red room, as if deciding whether or not he should enter. She nodded and waved him in, pointing her vibrating gun toward a low green velvet sofa. Once the stranger was settled, Cleo resumed her task. She was straddling a half-naked blonde man in his late 20s who lay immobile in the reclined leather chair while she sat, spread eagle, in a special netted sling suspended from the ceiling that allowed her long legs to hover inches above his own slumbering limbs. In this way she had full access to his body without endangering her own. A sleepy smile turned up the corners of his mouth as she shot him full of color. An hour passed silently but for the hum-humming of the tattoo gun and the gentle snoring of the blonde man. The stranger was warm and beginning to nod off on the sofa when the gun stopped abruptly and Cleo spoke. "All done." The blonde man didn't move. Cleo stroked a golden curl from the universe of sun-colored spirals that were splayed against the headrest, then removed her gloves, one finger at a time. She was pleased. The result was monstrous, elegant, and magnificent. The Japanese Kodo dragon rose from the depths of the man's groin as if it had broken free from his lightly tethered and vulnerable organs, furious with fever, livid with hunger. The dragon twisted across his torso in vibrant reds and purples and greens. Each hard scale was precisely and deeply inked. They were more than line and shape and color. They were roughly textured, glistening, steely. Together they seemed to pulse from the skin, to move, to struggle forward. The dragon's teeth were equally blinding. White and razor sharp, its eyes were crazed, fierce with desire. The dragon's head spun on the man's left shoulder. He was turning to stare down the viewer, to challenge to death anyone who dared remove the man's shirt. It was a shield, this dragon, and definitely not what he'd asked for. What did such a young, fair man know of the need for shields? It was Cleo who knew what he needed. His other tattoo, she had discovered, was a purple dancing bear, a logo for a band. It was small, too small, as though he hadn't really wanted it, or had worried about the pain, or had been persuaded by a flirty girl that it would be so cute. For what grown man has a small tattoo of a purple dancing bear? How was this bear going to affect his life, except to reinforce his boyish meekness? He looked to be nearly 27. Cleo couldn't allow it to continue. After he'd closed his eyes, before he became unawake, she whispered, "The bear is going to give his color to the dragon." "What a nice bear," he'd said. She leaned down now, looking for it. Her waist-length, silky dark hair brushed against his sleeping skin, teasing and tickling. Indeed, it was gone. No more purple dancing bear. The demon dragon had eaten it. She sighed, and her hot, happy exhale on his nipple woke him up. "Hello again." She pointed up to the full-length mirror mounted on the low ceiling, then swung swiftly away in her sling to let him see. The blonde man-child looked up and made eye contact with the dragon. He followed the beast's twisting form across his belly and lower until he realized he was looking directly down the front of his pants. He blushed. Cleo smiled. My eyes were closed the whole time. "It's stunning. I didn't feel it at all." "Really? It's true what they say. You are the Duchess of Touchless. You really didn't feel anything?" He did feel something, the blonde man-child, but it was something so close to a transcendental experience that his youthful mind had yet to form the concept of it, much less a vocabulary to describe it. He searched for words. "I feel something now," he said. "I feel different." "Good," Cleo smiled. "Different is sometimes what we need." "I needed this," he said, and he started to touch his dragon, but Cleo swung into place and stopped his hand. "Wait, we've got to cover him up for a few days and let you heal. He's got to become part of you, and then he'll be with you always." She climbed down from her net, bandaged the dragon, and sent it and his man-child on their way. Cleo turned her attention to the stranger on the sofa. "What brings you in?" The stranger started, "My name is Jacob Ashe. I've written a script. I'd like you to illustrate it." He opened his satchel and pulled out a manuscript. His hands were shaking as he handed it over. Cleo Krinos took a seat next to Jacob and began flipping through the pages of text. I don't think I understand. I'm a tattoo artist. Obviously, he said, that's why I'm here. He unbuttoned his shirt slowly, his fingers visibly struggling with the task. When he finally pulled the rough white linen away from his tanned torso, Cleo sucked in her breath. What is that? She asked. I've been planning this for a while, he said, and pulled his shirt off completely. His entire upper body, front, back, shoulders, and arms were tattooed with a grid, a network of ink, horizontal and vertical black lines which formed box after box, all blank, with thin spaces of unmarked skin between them. I'd like you to fill in the blanks, he said. There's more. He started to loosen his belt. Wait. Cleo was looking at the manuscript. The words were stage directions. Father stares out the window with his back to me. I kiss my mother, who is crying. She shut the book and shook her head. I'm sorry, I wouldn't even know where to begin. You could start at the beginning, Jacob said. I'm booked for a month. She tried to hand the manuscript back. I'll be dead in a month. He paused for dramatic effect, but her expression didn't change. I'll give you $50,000 cash if you start today. If Cleo was shocked, it didn't show. She sighed, it's your life story. It'll take hundreds of hours. A bodysuit, which is what you want, involves many visits. It can take someone months or even years before their suit is done. And if you're serious about your deadline, she was looking at his hands again, which were shaking. Sorry. Jacob would not be deterred. Look, the money is yours whether you finish or not. If it needs time to heal, to be permanent in the skin, then I need to walk out of here in 3 weeks, at whatever stage it's at. It looks painful. She was flipping through the pages again, mulling over his proposition. Jacob smiled, relieved. I chose you because you're the Duchess of Touchless. I know I won't feel a thing. Cleo was brisk and started to open the door. We'll start tomorrow, she said. I want to read the whole thing first. I've got to figure out how this all fits together. It fits, he said. Trust me. He ignored her with her hand on the open door and climbed into the leather tattoo chair, closing his eyes. I've been writing comic book strips for 20 years. The squares are there, he waved in the air. Every time you see an asterisk on the page, that's a square. That's what we're all made of, little squares. You put enough squares together and you have the big picture. You have history. So you want me to start with square one? Jacob nodded. But I don't know what any of the people in your history look like. Did you bring photos? He smiled. Use your imagination. I give you carte blanche. Jesus. Cleo was quiet for a moment, then shut the front door and turned the open sign to closed. Within the hour, Cleo was resuspended from her net, with black rubber hands and an archaic-looking tattoo gun. That's different than the one you used on the other guy. Jacob was peeking through half-closed eyes. It was my father's, she said. I'm honored. I use it for tattoos that take over 10 hours. Because it's gentler, Jacob asked? Because it's stronger. And because it's copper instead of plastic. It gets warm. She swung down into position, her black bodysuit stretching with her limbs until she was hovering horizontally, just inches above the network that was his pulsing skin. The warmer it gets, the more I can feel. Everything. She flicked the gun on, then paused, and turned it off again. These squares aren't numbered. How am I supposed to know where square one is? Where do you think it is? Jacob murmured. Put it where you think it goes. Chronology is less important than people think. You must love Vonnegut, she said, scanning his body. Maybe you should take off your pants. Is square one on my ass? He laughed. That would be just about right, I guess. Without leaving the chair, Jacob scooted out of his pants and tossed them to the floor. You could have left your boxers on, Cleo said. Oh, sorry, I don't believe in underwear. He lay nude and prostrate before her, twitching occasionally. Cleo reached over to her tool tray and grabbed a clean blotting rag and laid it across his lap. A whole body feeling of uneasy recognition sent a shudder down her tattooing arm, and she started up the gun again. I found square one, she said, and began shooting color into his heart.